The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on D&I.
But I'm thinking there's only one explanation for Tim spewing nonsense like this. Time of the month.
What happens when you mix a smug TV host with a governor who governs like he's lost in a Target parking lot? You get Greg Gutfeld absolutely obliterating Tim Walz like a gluten-free piñata at a carnivore convention. From botched policies to bureaucratic ballet, Gutfeld turns Minnesota's leadership into a stand-up comedy special with no intermission. Stick around. This roast is hotter than Tim's approval rating is cold. And yes, it's every bit as brutal as it is hilarious.
Tim Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank and service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there," and then ran away. Although Walz's actions look bad to veterans, Dems say these revelations could really help him win the coward vote.
Oh, Tim Walz. If political leadership were a buffet, he'd be the sad, room temperature mashed potatoes no one ordered, but that mysteriously appear next to your steak. Bland, unnecessary, and somehow still there. Enter Greg Gutfeld, wielding sarcasm like a chainsaw in a fireworks store, slicing through Walz's nonsense with the precision of a caffeinated Dexter on open mic night. It's less governance and more performance art. If the art was finger painting with expired mayonnaise.
Exploited his military background to cover up his crime. He said it was related to his service and that he actually wasn't drunk. He just misheard the instructions in the drunk test. He blew a super high level. It was like, 0.2, driving 100 miles an hour. And then when he's running for office, he said that he wasn't drunk. I mean, this guy has creep written all over. He created a snitch line, but lies about his personal infractions. He doesn't even own up to it. This is a guy who pushes a hoax about sex on a couch. And then the closer you look at him, he's a creepy cuck.
Let's be honest. Tim Walz governing Minnesota is like watching a substitute teacher try to control a room full of caffeinated raccoons. He speaks like a guy who read Leadership for Dummies and thought, yes, this will be my entire political philosophy. And the execution? Oh, it's flawless. If your goal is to turn the land of 10,000 lakes into the land of 10,000 bad idea.
Saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot who he is.
Greg Gutfeld didn't even have to try hard. Roasting Tim Walz is like dunking on a guy wearing Crocs to a job interview, blindfolded. It's as if Walz showed up to a debate with a kazoo and a whiteboard that just says feelings. He practically begged for it, handing Gutfeld a roast platter labeled extra crispy, then leaning in and whispering, "Be savage." Honestly, it's not even satire anymore. It's competitive sarcasm. And Walz showed up with glitter glue and a participation ribbon.
Walz is a strange dude.
Oh, he's strange.
He is strange. Him and I are the same age. How does he look so much younger?
No, he's a strange guy.
Strange.
He called up years ago. I was in the White House, and he said, my house is being surrounded by people with American flags. I said, is that a good thing or a bad thing? He said, I think they're going to attack me. But this was during the riots and everything else. They were MAGA people. You know, they like the American flag, all right? And they also had Trump. And I said, how do you know? There were about 15,000, he said, could you put out a word like that I'm your friend? I don't even know him, but that's the only time I ever spoke to him. And if you look back long ago, tweets, before Truth, tweets, long ago, I put out a statement. He's a good man, the governor. He's on our side. I didn't know him, but I didn't want him to get hurt. And everybody put down their flags and they left. Yes. He said it was a miracle. He said it was a miracle.
Let's start with the economy, shall we? Tim Walz looked at inflation, unemployment, and the exodus of businesses and said, you know what would help? More taxes. Let's tax the oxygen. Let's tax smiles. Let's tax people for thinking about moving to South Dakota. Businesses are fleeing Minnesota like it's a haunted house built entirely out of CO2 mandates and social justice PowerPoints. And Gutfeld? He tore through Walz's economic policy like a raccoon through a compost bin. He practically screamed, how do you manage to make California look like a capitalist utopia in comparison? The only thing growing in Minnesota under Walz is government paperwork and the collective migraine of the middle class. Now, let's talk about crime. Tim Walz has the same approach to public safety that a toddler has to playing with matches. Optimistic, delusional, and ending in sirens. His idea of addressing rising crime rates? Blame society, hold hands, and hope criminals are moved by interpretive dance. It's like handing out scented candles in a burning building.
On the same bad cocaine, but Kamala can't speak, he can't speak, Biden was so high he couldn't remember anything. Like, this is literally the dumbest administration of all time. Why is he talking?
It really is the ultimate clown show. And I said this in the pod. He's a clown without a circus. He's
Doesn't
just
even need
roaming,
makeup.
He's roaming the terrain. Is there some carnival that I could work for? Yeah. I'll wash your windows.
He's a rogue clown.
Yes.
Who is just an inconsequential footnote to vice presidential history.
Yeah.
No one will remember his name on trivia night, and that's going to be in 3 months from now.
Meanwhile, Gutfeld's over here doing stand-up comedy with statistics. He practically held up a map of Minnesota with the words, "Here be carjackings," scrawled across the Twin Cities. He compared Walz's crime strategy to a mall cop trying to stop a riot with a kazoo and a clipboard. If Tim Walz were in charge of national security, we'd all be learning Russian by next week. And education? Oh, let's dive into that glittering dumpster fire. Tim Walz, a former teacher himself, because of course he is, decided to turn Minnesota classrooms into sanctuaries of woke word salad. Forget math and science. Kids are now being graded on how well they can identify microaggressions and construct safe spaces out of popsicle sticks. Gutfeld wasn't just sarcastic. He went full blast. He said the only test students are passing in Minnesota is the How to Be Perpetually Offended exam. Under Walz, classrooms are less about learning and more about performance art. You don't get detention anymore. You get a participation trophy and a TikTok therapy session.
I'm especially talking about these old white guys who seem to disappoint us on a regular basis in this country.
Dude. You're an old white guy. And you're right, you are a huge disappointment. I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us. He wants to execute more DEI policies, and Trump wants to execute murderous gang members. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Can you see the difference?
And can we please address the COVID policies? Oh boy. Tim Walz treated the pandemic like it was his audition for America's next top authoritarian. Shut down everything. Arrest bar owners. Fine churches. But hey, protests? Those were spiritually essential. Apparently, the virus respects political alignment. Who knew? Greg Gutfeld couldn't resist that buffet of hypocrisy. He pointed out that Walz shut down Grandma's bingo night but threw open the streets for massive demonstrations, as long as they featured at least one Marxist chant and a papier-mâché puppet. It's not public health policy. It's interpretive theater with a clipboard. And don't even start on the budget surplus. Minnesota had a surplus so big, Even Tim Walz couldn't ignore it. So naturally, instead of giving it back to the taxpayers, the people who actually earned it, he treated it like monopoly money at a government garage sale. Let's expand bureaucracy, buy new diversity consultants, and maybe build a taxpayer-funded mural of myself, looking contemplative.
Is that Walz lost, but one of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Sorry. Still. That was every. Yeah.
Gutfeld nearly passed out from the irony. He said, Walz spending a surplus is like giving a toddler a credit card and asking him to stick to the essentials. Sure, Tim. I'm sure the Department of Overregulation really needed that new espresso machine and gender equity executive yoga retreat. And speaking of bureaucracy, Tim Walz has turned red tape into a competitive sport. You can't open a lemonade stand in Minnesota without 14 permits, a background check, and an official pronoun declaration. It's like Soviet Minnesota, with better branding and worse outcomes. Greg Gutfeld made it sound like Walz was trying to win a gold medal in bureaucratic gymnastics. Every decision involves more flips, spins, and contortions than a Cirque du Soleil show about tax policy. And let's not forget his bizarre, clingy obsession with Gavin Newsom. It's like Walz has a California crush so intense, he's trying to turn Minneapolis into San Francisco's colder, less competent cousin.
Tim Walz vomits more nonsense.
I called Donald Trump a wannabe dictator. It's because he is. It's because he is. Maybe it's a dolt like Donald Trump, you bully the out of him back. This is a weak, cruel man that takes it out and punches down on people.
Wow. Oh. Jamie.
What a
Painful,
douchebag,
huh?
Greg. That was absolutely painful. He was the keynote speaker at this conference. Can you imagine having to watch more of that?
He sees Gavin Newsom torch California like a scented candle made of bad policy and thinks, brilliant. But what if I add frostbite and subtract job opportunities? It's like he's reading from the West Coast script of disaster, except he's performing it in snow boots, with fewer vowels and more property taxes. Gutfeld didn't hold back. He said, if Gavin Newsom is a walking shampoo ad with the self-esteem of a Bond villain, then Tim Walz is his understudy, who wandered in halfway through the play and started improvising in Pig Latin. Walz struts around like he's the love child of Bernie Sanders and a malfunctioning traffic light, pretending to be a progressive savior while tripping over every department he touches. And transportation? Please. The man pitched a multi-million-dollar bullet train that might get finished around the same time dinosaurs make a comeback. Meanwhile, Minnesota roads look like a post-apocalyptic Mario Kart track, and residents just want their suspension systems to live past 30. But no, he's too busy selling fantasy trains like he's auditioning for Hogwarts, while real infrastructure crumbles like gluten-free toast.
So the tone of the media was one of sadness, not reporting Walz's loss, but mourning it. Now, the truth is that a VP debate is like a colonoscopy. It's important and necessary, but that doesn't mean you want to watch it.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Yeah. Even a deer in the headlights is screaming, "Get the out of the way, dude!" It's no wonder they don't do follow-up questions with Democrats. They're like the top layer of day-old skimpy bean dip. What's underneath? You don't want to see.
Greg Gutfeld? He rolled his eyes so hard they practically qualified for a seismic reading. The sarcasm was so thick, it needed its own zip code. Oh, brilliant move. Tim, let's toss common sense in the recycling bin and invest billions into Elon Musk fanfiction on rails. Because nothing screams fiscal genius like building a bullet train to nowhere that's slower than a DMV line and less useful than a solar-powered flashlight in January. Walz's media appearances? Imagine a man cosplaying as a competent leader while delivering speeches with the clarity of a dial-up modem underwater. He talks in endless, rambling circles, like a GPS stuck in recalculate mode. Somewhere, his advisors are behind the curtain, throwing flashcards and flares, just hoping he lands a single point. Gutfeld tore through it like a drunk poet at slam night. Watching Walz explain policy is like witnessing a raccoon attempt Morse code with oven mitts. Confusing, alarming, and somehow still convinced he nailed it. It's not just awkward. It's an Olympic event in verbal gymnastics. No one asked to watch.
Meanwhile, Kamala's VP, Tim Walz, is being accused of lying about his rank, which is called stolen valor. But in Walz's defense in Minneapolis, stealing is legal. But misrepresenting your past for political gain? I don't see that as a problem, said one woman.
And when the heat's on, Tim Walz doesn't just pivot. He pirouettes like a ballerina hopped up on 5 Red Bulls and a subscription to The Atlantic. Ask him about skyrocketing crime, and suddenly he's passionately explaining how installing more bike lanes will reduce felony charges. Mention the economy circling the drain, and he starts lecturing on gender-neutral parking lots and the emotional burden of asphalt. Governance? Please. This is interpretive policy theater, where every issue is met with a TED Talk on feelings and a slideshow about community healing through ukulele circles. Greg Gutfeld nailed it. Walz is basically a magic 8-ball wearing orthotics. Shake him, and the answer is always some vague nonsense involving intersectional frameworks or equity gardening. And the branding? Oh, don't even start. Walz struts around like a down-home farm dad, but his idea of roughing it is having to drink almond milk without a paper straw.